The stillness of this room. Stella squeezed her father's shoulder, walked to the gramophone and lifted the needle from the record. She looked out of the kitchen window at grey skies, at clouds heavy with rain slanting down on the horizon now. She imagined making the mark with a wet brush in watercolour, and the winter colours of the fields. She would paint this day in umber, sap green, and Payne's grey. Hatherstall was blackthorn and hawthorn, bramble and bog cotton, sooted brick and millstone grit. It was the Liberal Club and the Mechanics' Institute, chapel voices singing Jerusalem, and the wrong kind of brass bands. At this moment, Paris felt so distant that it might just have been an image projected onto a wall by a magic lantern. When she turned back to him, her father had sat himself up and taken out his handkerchief. "I'm sorry," he said. "What a bloody fool. What must you think of me?" Stella returned to her chair at his side. There were tears on his cheeks as his eyes met hers, and she wanted to stretch her fingertips out and gently wipe them away. There were new lines and shadows on his face, too, she saw now, as she looked at him closely. "No, it's my fault. I should have thought. Was it that you remembered her playing that record?" Her mother would often have her father carry the gramophone into the kitchen, and she'd put on Al Bowley or Paul Whiteman as she worked here at this table. She liked the big sound of the American bands and knew the lyrics to Cole Porter and Irving Berlin songs. Stella couldn't recall that she'd ever heard her mother playing Josephine Baker, but did that record have a particular significance for her father? He seemed to be making an effort to compose himself now. She heard him take a deep breath. He straightened his knife and fork, reminding Stella that their dinner would probably be burning in the oven. But it didn't matter. She put a hand over his. "It just reminded me of what she was like," he said, looking down at the table. His fingers traced the grain of the wood, and he shrugged his shoulders before he looked up. "Of how we were, of how it used to be." Stella laced her fingers through her father's. She knew what he meant. There used to be a family who had music in the background, who practiced their Charleston steps in the kitchen, checking their reflections in the window, and who laughed a lot. In her mother's day, this room had always been full of music and laughter. Now, in the spaces between their words, it was silent, and the atmosphere was heavy with her mother's absence. "I understand. I'm sorry," Stella said. Would they ever be a family who danced around the kitchen table again? At this moment, it seemed unlikely. "I made my father cry today," Stella said. She was glad that she'd caught Michael before he left for the restaurant, but his voice on the telephone seemed dreadfully far away. "I thought it might be cheerful to have some music in the background, but it reminded him of my mother." "Your poor father," he said. "He must miss her terribly still. And poor you too. How upsetting for you." "I'm trying so hard. Honestly, I am, Michael. But some days I can't seem to get anything right." Stella wished that she could put her head on Michael's shoulder and tell him how the slightest thing upset her father now, how fragile he seemed to have become, and how sometimes they sat in long silences because she was frightened of saying the wrong words. There were days when they were irritable with each other and she felt tension knotting in her stomach. She longed to have a conversation that wasn't threaded with tripwires and, just briefly, to be able to tell someone how she was feeling. She wished she could have a face-to-face conversation with Michael like they used to, both of them pulling their feet up onto his sofa, a direct, candid conversation that didn't have to be curtailed by him running off to his next shift at the restaurant. "It's still early days, I suppose, isn't it?" he said. "How long has it been now? Nearly 12 months? Is he looking after himself?" "He puts a clean shirt on every day and he's keeping the house tidy. but he seems to be